I get a chance to welcome a fellow who is becoming a very dear friend. And not only that, he is the fabulous voice of the Indianapolis Colts. And he joins me right now on the Evader Coffee guest line. Please help me welcome Mr. Matt Taylor. And he joins me right now. What's up, Matt?
Hey, how we doing? How's it going?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I am doing good, staying busy, trying to keep track of things, but all in all, I'm doing great.
That is fabulous. You and I both are trying to keep track of things. How crazy has this free agency period been?
Well, it's always busy, right? I mean, no matter what kind of season you're coming off of, what the expectations are going into the following season, it's always busy. I mean, every year your roster turns over about a third, at least a third,
Yep.
and that's the good teams, right? I mean, you can go 4-12-1 like the Colts did a year ago, or you can win the Super Bowl like the Kansas City Chiefs. About a third of your roster is going to change because of free agency, the salary cap. That's just the nature of the business. And so, I think there's a lot of people that are just as interested, maybe more so, in this time of year when you talk about contracts and you talk about analytics and just the business of football. People geek out on this time of year, and there's going to be a lot of roster turnover between now and the start of training camp. But this is the first kind of the busiest first week, if you will, the start of NFL free agency. Then we're going to have the draft. But this is a big week in kind of shaping how this Colts team is going to look in 2024, trying to make the playoffs.
What's the first thing that you believe the Colts need to shore up to make them that playoff team that they were so close? They were so close to having this past season.
Well, the first thing they've done is that they've shorn up a lot of holes that they potentially were going to have if they let some of their unrestricted in-house free agents leave to other teams. And they've been really busy this week. I mean, as we sit here and talk now, 7 in-house free agents are coming back, and a lot of them are starters, right? You're talking about Michael Pittman Jr. on offense, Grover Stewart, and Kenny Moore, and Tyquan Lewis, Ronnie Harrison, Jannard Avery on defense. You got your punter back in Rigoberto Sanchez. So those are important signings. I know it doesn't really kind of move the needle as much as, when we talk about free agency, the common fan wants to see something new. Well, you still have to, field a good football team, and these are good football players that played significant amounts last year. And had they left this team, you're looking at, maybe a diminishing return at some of these spots. Like Grover Stewart, a guy really hard to replace. Michael Pittman Jr., really hard to replace, especially in terms of what he means to this team and in terms of this offense, right? Same thing with Kenny Moore, one of the best nickel corners in the NFL, right? These guys just don't grow on trees. It's not like you can just, go down to the next guy in free agency and overpay that guy, and he's going to be just as good as Kenny Moore. And a lot of these guys have been here 7, 8 years in the case of Kenny Moore and Tyquan Lewis and Grover Stewart. And so you got a lot of familiarity about these guys, and they just kind of fit who you are in terms of your culture and how you want to do things. I think the next biggest thing outside of that is, certainly you want to find more playmakers. I mean, if you're watching the playoffs the last couple of years, you don't need to be a football savant to understand sort of the roster mechanics and the makeup of what it takes to win big in the month of January and February, right? It's you got to have a great quarterback on offense. You have to have a good left tackle, and you have to be able to win outside on the perimeter with great wide receivers. And I think it's really imperative that Michael Pittman Jr. is now back, and we know what he is in terms of his game and his value to this team. He's high volume in terms of catches. He's going to dominate the middle of the field between the numbers. But I think the Colts right now are still exploring more ways to get more explosive outside the numbers and deeper down the field, add some more pop to their offense that I think is inevitably going to come with Anthony Richardson coming back, Jonathan Taylor being in the same backfield as the quarterback. That's inevitably going to help, but I think you're still in search of, another playmaker on offense that can catch the ball. And I think that probably at this point in free agency, and I hope I'm not speaking too soon, but My gut is telling me that that likely is coming in the draft with a bevy of great wide receivers sprinkled all over this draft. I mean, based on what you're reading and who you're talking to, you can get a wide receiver that can come in and play and be a big contributor for you, as late as the fourth round, day 3 of the draft. So that's really encouraging. So the Colts are targeting that. I still think they need some help in the secondary as well. Kenny Moore's coming back like we talked about, but you're still relatively young in the secondary, especially at corner with Dallas Flowers coming off his injury and Jalen Jones being a rookie. And you've got Juju Brents, who had an up and down season last year in terms of his availability, dealt with a lot of injuries last year as a rookie. So I think another veteran maybe to stabilize the secondary would make a lot of sense. But again, we're just getting started here, in the infancy, if you will, on this first week of free agency.
We are indeed just getting started on this part of free agency. How big is it for y'all to bring back Zaire Franklin?
Well, I mean, he was coming back on this team regardless for next year, but what the Colts have done, they've done right by him, and you're always glad to see that because the Colts have set a precedent under Chris Ballard of taking care of their own and doing right by the guys that they invest in, that perform well on the field, and they're just great locker room bought-in guys. We've seen that over the years with prior to like Braden Smith and Shaq Leonard in years past, and Quentin Nelson. Ryan Kelly's received a contract extension. If you look at Zaire Franklin, his first couple of years in the NFL, he was scratching and clawing to not only make the roster, but kind of carve out a niche for himself on special teams, and he was damn good at it. And he added depth at the linebacker position. But when you've got Shaq Leonard in front of you making plays at the historic pace that he was his first couple of years, it's going to be hard for Zaire Franklin to get on the field. And that's the most impressive part about his journey to me is that his first couple of years in the NFL, he talked about this. He was looking for a couple of reps every other team period. I mean that's how seldom he was used because of the talent that was in front of him. You look at Anthony Walker and Bobby Okereke. I mean, these are really good players that are in front of him, and he's just classic story of working hard, buying your time, keeping a great attitude, and just when hard work and opportunity meet, that's where Zaire Franklin has turned himself into Zaire Franklin, one of the best linebackers in the game right now. And so when his opportunity to re-sign with this team came about in 2022, he wasn't yet, a full-time starter on defense at linebacker. He signed what was essentially a really good special teams contract, if you will. And he outplayed that, by leaps and bounds the last 2 years. And each of the last 2 years, he has set the Colts franchise record for tackles in a single season. And again, has just cemented himself as, I think, the biggest leader on this team, one of the best linebackers in the game. And I think good on the Colts for taking a step back and saying, hey, we probably need to redo this thing to do right by you, because it sets an example and sets a precedent and sends a message to the rest of the locker room that, hey, if you do things the right way and you hold yourself to the standard that Zaire Franklin does, we can redo your contract and we can do right by you to make sure that we got a team friendly deal on this side, and we're also taking care of our players from the individual standpoint as well. So really good to see him now get paid accordingly. And for him, he's in a different tax bracket. There's no doubt about that, but he's now his compensation now reflected in terms of what he means to this team and just how good of a player he is on defense.
We're talking with Matt Taylor, the fabulous radio voice of the Indianapolis Colts, talking all things Colts and free agent happenings and possible draft happenings. The biggest piece of the puzzle, and you mentioned it a few moments ago, the development and the health and the comeback of Anthony Richardson, because you and I talked about it before. We've seen flashes of AR5, but now with the Colts being that close to a playoff berth, Anthony Richardson can really make this offense sing and make this Colts offense go.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. It's just, what does it look like, right? To what degree will the Colts have more success offensively next year? I mean, I think
Right.
dynamically they're going to be much different and I think better than they were a year ago. And that's no slight at Gardner Minshew, because quite frankly, there's no one in the history of this league that has the physical tools and the dynamic ability of Anthony Richardson. I mean, he proved that last year at the Combine, just blowing out all these quarterback measurables out of the water. So that's not hyperbole. And if you watched him in the limited sample size that you saw him for last year in the first 4 games of the season, I mean, this is not a cliche. Like, I'm on the edge of my seat calling these games. Like, I'm so excited watching him play with quarterback draws and read options and pushing the ball down the field, explosive plays. I mean, the Colts last year, totality-wise for the season, finished towards the bottom in terms of big plays and, scoring drives that didn't have, 10, 11, 12 play drive, or I should say long drives about them.
Yeah.
But the first 4 games of the season, the big plays in this offense were there with Anthony Richardson. And I think, again, his presence along with Jonathan Taylor, I mean, what do you do if you're a defense? If you stack the box to sell out against the run, then you're going to have plays on the outside for, I think, a playmaker that's inevitably going to be here and be added in the draft, and for Michael Pittman Jr. and for some of these tight ends, like Mo Alley Cox and Will Mallory and Kylan Granson. But if you lighten the load and respect the Colts game to be able to push the ball down the field, then you have an open box for Jonathan Taylor and for Anthony Richardson. And that's, oh my God, tantalizing. So, I think his presence alone is really going to help just the schematics of this offense be more dynamic and add some more, efficiency about it. But there's no question that the Colts can't be, that heavy kind of RPO team that they were last year. And again, that's not slighting Gardner Minshew. That's just who he was. The Colts, I think, at times last year were kind of relegated to playing on a 15 and 20-yard field. And, when Michael Pittman Jr. was out in that pivotal game last year, I think it was week 16, right around Christmas time, against the Falcons, I mean, it was hard for the Colts to move the ball. The Falcons stopped the run, loaded the box, and it was tough sledding for the Colts. I just think with all these playmakers that I think are going to come, Michael Pittman Jr. back and Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the same backfield, that's going to put a lot of stress on opposing defensive coordinators. And I think the Colts are prime to be, much better next year on offense and score. Heck, I think the sky's the limit. Score 28 points per game and win a lot of games in a shootout fashion if they have to. I don't think there's any reason to think that they can't do that with Anthony Richardson coming back. Matt
Taylor, the fabulous voice of the Indianapolis Colts, giving us all the scoop on the Colts happening in Indiana's capital city. We're gonna do this again for another season. He's going to join and give us all the Colts happenings. I love you very much, brother. Thank you so much. And it took just me sending a message to him and Matt saying, sure, I'll come on. Let's do it. So we've done it the last 2 years. We're heading into another season, starting with free agency, and then the draft comes along. I love when you come on the show, my friend. I appreciate you.
No, it's my pleasure. Life should be as easy as that, right? Send
Absolutely.
Let's go.
All right.
Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Yep, be good.